Hi everyone, welcome to Hidden in Plain Sight. It's our first video of 2026. A lot has happened, and I don't really think I'm going to do an update on any of that since my last video. I'm just going to save the update on things for another time. I'm deeming this video an overview testimony of my life and what I've overcome so far, as well as where I am at in my life and my healing journey from what I've been through. To start off, I want to kind of give a very, very brief overview of some of the traumas that I have endured, so that people are aware. And this is not my full story. It is not the full extent of the trauma that I have personally experienced in this body and in my mind. But it's a starting place. And so, basically, I was born into a very wicked family, where I was raised two different ways. I essentially lived a double life and didn't know it. And one of the ways that happened is because out of their wickedness, my evil family pre-planned to traumatize me so that I would split off into pieces. Because what happens when you have severe trauma and stress, if it's extreme stress, especially in childhood, it can cause you to mentally and emotionally detach from yourself, from your caregivers, from your sense of safety. It's very well proven in psychology. You can look into that, related to anxious, avoidant, and secure attachment. There's a lot that is well known about that, and they utilized that knowledge to purposefully traumatize me in a way that my mind had to compartmentalize my trauma into rooms and locked that information away up here to keep my mind and my body safe, to survive what I went through. I was raised two different ways. One part of me was raised in the Southern Baptist Church as a virginal Christian, was kind of the cover-up that the family wanted me to appear as, so that it could further hide that they were active Satanists that were also involving me in satanic ritual abuse. And on top of that, they were also trafficking me as a child in sex trafficking to make money off of my body. And so the Christian cover-up was one of the ways that allowed people to overlook what was happening to me, which is kind of why I came up with the name of my channel, Hidden in Plain Sight, because I was a girl in the pews on Sunday, and people could not or chose not to see the trauma that I was enduring because of how actively involved in the church my satanic family was. And since then, I've really come to realize that a lot of churches are being run by Satanists, but that's going to be a video for another time. I can share that another day. But basically, my mother is a narcissist, as well as I believe my father. It's kind of perpetuates. I think it perpetuates. Is that the right word? I don't know. I'm not going to stress about it. I think it presents itself. There's the word. Okay, presents itself differently in men and women, and it's a lot more noticeable in my mother for me than it is in my father, just because my father has a temper and he's just angry all the time, so he doesn't fit some of the same characteristics of like a grandiose narcissist, but he is a very wicked man, and I could see him having it to some degree as well. And part of that abuse also led us to be gaslit a lot, as well as brainwashed, and our perception of reality was always undermined or as well gaslit and otherwise distorted by our family members to essentially not believe what we were picking up on as true. You know, things like when we were being trafficked and when puberty started, we ended up getting pregnant and stuff, but we didn't know we were pregnant because we didn't know the signs of pregnancy. And so we did notice body changes and symptoms that we weren't familiar with, so we brought those things up to our mother and a family member that was a nurse, a medical nurse, and we trusted their word on things because they were the adults in our life. And, you know, of course, a nurse, a medical professional, you would trust too. So they came up with these answers that made sense to me as a child to kind of calm those concerns, but it also allowed for them to hide that I was pregnant from me. And so a lot of what I was dealing with, I was gaslit into believing was like a normal physical health issue or a normal part of growing up and being a girl for most of my life, only to have a lot of these repressed memories come out once my body and my mind finally felt safe. So, we didn't really, the part of us that grew up as the Christian cover-up didn't really know about the other parts, and the other parts of us didn't really know about them either. There was just that much of a disconnect from the two different lives that our body was living. Partially because of how traumatizing those things are. PTSD, amnesia is very common to have as a symptom, especially when traumatic events occur. Your brain just kind of will forget temporarily, especially when you're constantly going through repeated traumas over and over and over again, like we were on a sometimes daily basis. It's too much for the brain to be able to process, that it just wipes the memory and it goes for a little while until a trigger can then bring it forward and you get flashbacks and things like that. And so occasionally over the years, different parts of us would have, nightmares or weird dreams of things that would get triggered in our sleep, of things that we now can look back and realize were snippets of memories that were coming forward of things that happened to us either recently at that time or earlier, a few years earlier. They were just kind of popping up as a means for our brain to attempt to start to process these things. But for the most part, we were just kind of in constant survival mode and just, trauma after trauma after trauma just piling up into our brain's memory bank, and then it just getting wiped clean for the next trauma to come flying through. It also didn't help that, well, I guess it helped the mean people with us forgetting things, but it didn't help with our memory recall of things, because they would also be drugging us to transport us to different places, which would also sometimes distort our memories sometimes, or distort our perception of time and location, that kind of thing. And so when different parts started to come forward, it took time. Well, it was kind of like a flooding tsunami of memories at first, and then occasionally a part would come forward. The first part that came forward, which we called number 2, because we called the cover-up part that was kind of the public part that everyone's been aware of or interacted with, number 1. And so number 2 came out with a bunch of just generic memories, which we realized which at first we thought were all connected to her, but then we realized that she just kind of unlocked the door to, a mass amount of memories all at once that just came flooding out. And for, I think 6 months after that, we couldn't figure out why that happened at that time. It just happened to be, we figured out later on that it was a trauma anniversary that kind of triggered this flooding of stuff to come out, as well as that part. And then I think after number 2 came out in February of 2023, let's see if we're remembering correctly, number 3 came out, and number 4 came out in, 3, 4, 5, and 6 came out in May of 2023. And then, well, actually, I can't really go into the nitty-gritty details because I'll be here all night figuring this stuff out. But, yeah, at first, it was just a rush of memories and parts, and when they would come forward, at first there was lots of amnesia and switching. There was disorientation because some parts hadn't been forward in a while, so the sense of time was off, and every time we'd switch, that would kind of happen again, or especially at the very beginning. So it was really disorienting. And then based on what each part of us was used for, because again, this was like a purposeful thing that our evil parents did. They purposefully split us into parts. We further broke into more parts than they wanted us to, I think. I don't really know for sure if they had an exact number at the moment, but because we weren't wanting to go along with their plan. We didn't want to become who they were trying to make us be. And so that shattered us even more on an emotional and mental level. And there is now 39 parts of us that we were able to confirm, and we do believe we found every single part of us now, and we're kind of on this path towards wholeness going forward from here. But the process to get to this point has been just like a roller coaster, up and down, up and down, up and down. Because the memories would at first, because our nervous system and our brain and our body on a subconscious level finally felt safe to just unlock the floodgates of everything that happened to us. And while we haven't been able to recall all of our exact memories of our entire life, a majority of the trauma events have come through, and there's already quite a bit of them already. I can't get into them all in one video, hence why this is an overview. Or at least I'm trying to make it to be one. And depending on what we were used for, and abused for, would kind of impact when our body would become forward. So, for example, different parts of us, when we came forward, we would have different challenges. Like, some of my pots were littles, and they would be basically developmentally and emotionally a child. And coming along with that, they might not know how to read or write. And so for a season or whenever they were out, one of the things they would work on would be learning how to read or write. Some of them didn't know how to speak because there was a spirit of muteness on them, or they were just too scared to speak and didn't trust the people around us. I think it was a combination of both, personally. But, some of it can be too scared. And to be honest, it just kind of feels like you're showing up in a strange place with strangers, because in some ways that's technically what was happening. Because the part of us that came to the place that we are at now, living, our safe place, and with our support system, that part of us knew the people that we currently live with. But every other part of us never met them. And so when those parts came forward that hadn't met them, it was as if you just walked into some stranger's house and was just like, "Hi, I'm here. And I don't know why." And the parts of us that endured being sold as sex slaves actually asked the people we're living with if they bought us, because that's all that part knew, was when we show up in a new place, we were purchased. And so that was just sort of their norm for so long, that when we came forward in a safe place with safe people, we didn't know that yet. And we kind of relearned who these people are that a part of us knew. And that involved learning how different life and people can be. Parts of us didn't know the money system existed or what money was. Parts of us didn't know how shopping for food works, and just general life skills. And then on top of that, whether it be from spirits or just a sheer amount of fear and unknown, we didn't really know how to naturally do things, because most of us spent our entire life being a slave, being told what to do, and being coerced and forced to do things, or we would be harmed in a major way, or almost killed, and sometimes attempted to be killed. You don't learn to think for yourself or do for yourself, but yet the people you're living with are not gonna tell you what to do, because they're actually kind and loving, and they don't want you to be a slave. And you don't know what it's like to be free. You don't know what it's like to be able to come up with your own ideas of what you want to do, or what you want to eat, or what you want to think about or feel. I mean, a lot of it, for a while, we were just kind of frozen, waiting for our next orders from our slave masters. Was that for some of us? And so, in a way, that was also a challenge for us, because, to go from a majority of us being raised by Satanists, where we're being told what to do and just controlled by them, A lot of Satanists actually mimic the ways of Christianity and Jesus, but in a wicked way. And so, different parts of us would be coming forward with spirits and demons, and with each part of us that didn't know Jesus was being taught about Jesus, and being taught about Jesus because we were being told that Jesus could get rid of those spirits that we were scared of, that were attacking us and terrorizing us and terrifying us. And we liked the idea of being freed of the mean monsters that were, torturing us up here, and sometimes manifesting and taking over our body and doing things that we didn't want them to be doing. But when, we'd be taught about Jesus at first, some of the things about Jesus sounded in some ways similar to what was going on in Satan's kingdom. I'll probably do a video more in depth on that, because I feel like it really needs it. But, just like I mentioned in another video, I was kind of born into a satanic priestly line. And so a lot of what they did mimics what the biblical Levites did in the Old Testament. And so to transition from being born into a satanic family to being told that the way of Jesus was freedom, but yet there was parallels to both paths, it was challenging. And I'll definitely share more about that in videos to come, and I'm willing to share more if anyone's interested in that. But I will say we decided to take a chance and choose Jesus, and we decided to ask for his help to be freed of these different spirits and demons. And while the process was intense in the moment, because these spirits didn't really want to leave our body, they didn't want to leave our space where they deemed their home, and so they kind of fought that a bit, which I can share more on another time. But after they were gone, we weren't getting tormented anymore by that spirit. We weren't being influenced emotionally by it, because one of the things that we've been able to pick up on through this process is that when there's a spirit, it would kind of feel energetically outside of our body, even though we knew it was inside of our body. It just felt detached. But yet, we also felt such a strong connection to its emotions, because we had united with them in some way with their emotions. And that's kind of how they were sticking around a little bit too. So much more on that. But once they were gone, we were able to kind of dial down our emotions and our emotional reaction. Not that we were numb or anything like that, because that was definitely not the case, but that we could have a more, I guess, healthy emotional reaction, and it wasn't as intense or reactive or explosive. Excuse me. Every time I make a video where I start to share my testimony, when I start to share my story, I get coughing fits, and I'm trying to figure out what is trying to silence me, but I try to talk through it anyway. I swear, I could make videos on, generic things related to my life and talk for over an hour and never cough. But when I start exposing things, I have coughing fits. And I haven't figured that one out yet. But anyways, I'm a little off track there. But basically, I'm sharing that even though it's been a challenging, wrestling kind of road, switching from Satanism to Jesus's kingdom and the ways of Jesus, I'm seeing more and more benefits over time. I'm not fully healed yet. I still have a lot of things that I'm working through, but because I finally feel like we actually have all of our parts out fully this time, and each part of us has decided to give Jesus a chance. And our last part that came out in November of last year, only a couple months ago, that part was the most resistant in wanting to choose Jesus. There's just so many spirits trapped with that part of us, as well as a lot of our really ugly emotions, resentment, anger, hatred, just all these intense emotions that in some ways aren't necessarily bad, but they were kind of getting to that poisonous level for us in an unhealthy way because of just the sheer amount of injustices in our life that we're not being dealt with, that we're not getting justice for. And so it just kind of kept getting bottled up. And that part of us, just, the way they would describe it is like, they were like standing here and they just turned just a tiny little pinch, or as the cheesy Christian symbolism of a mustard seed, towards Jesus, and said hesitantly, okay. And Jesus swooped in and moved in a mighty way in that part's life by removing multiple spirits and demons. And the feeling we get when we're on the other side of a spirit or a demon that was removed, that was really oppressing us, attacking us, and strongly influencing us in ways that we didn't really realize, we kind of felt not only more at peace, but just more ourself, and like this cloud of oppression and intense, anger or other emotions were just lifted away. Like the burden of whatever that spirit was doing to us was gone. And it just kind of felt like we felt lighter emotionally and spiritually, and with each spirit and demon that he has removed from us, it has helped us to continue to feel that way. And now at this point in our healing journey, we're kind of working through some of our foundational beliefs and mindsets and some of our deeper childhood wounds that I don't think we have been able to really look at until all of our parts were out, because every part of us deeply just wanted to be loved, wanted to be wanted, and wanted to be loved no matter what. And the parts of us that even had the darkest and deepest and hardest emotions, even that part of us wanted to be loved. Even if it had resentment and hatred and anger and desire to just destroy everyone because they wanted to get back at the world. I mean, obviously we didn't really act on that one in the moment there recently, but it was just deep down, a majority of every part of us was just a broken child that wanted to be picked up and held and loved. And even if we were having some sort of very valid emotional and trauma-induced temper tantrum for what happened to us, And we never got that with our parents at all. And we never will. But we've slowly been finding it in healthy ways with our healthy chosen family and support system. And we've been finding it in Jesus. And recently we've been realizing that instead of trying to fix our emotions, that we just kind of need to sit with them and just hold them and make space for our emotions in the ways that we always wanted to be held too. And that's been kind of shifting for us in a way that, and kind of freeing for us, because we're slowly working towards coming to terms with the reality is we thought something was wrong with us. We thought we were just some broken child that couldn't do anything right, that could never please our parents in a way that would get them to love us. And instead, we've realized we were never the problem. Our feelings, our valid emotions, our valid pain and sufferings was never the problem. They made us feel like they were the problem, but they weren't. And so to now have this time to hold space for our emotions, for each part of us, to come to this terms of they were the problem, they hurt us, and I'm just gonna hold this, has been kind of freeing. Not having to fix it or correct it or prove it right. It just is. It just is what we feel. And that's okay based on what we've been through. And to slowly realize and be surrounded by people that also affirm that is true. That's okay. You with what you feel, or for what you've been through, and that we're still loved. And that Jesus himself tells us that what we feel is valid for what we've been through, and we are still loved. We still have a ways to go with refining and working through emotions. You know, like I said, the resentment and the hatred and the more poisonous emotions. But for now, I think we're being shown that it's okay to just sit with them. And while it's not meant to, root into anything that would, grow into something unhealthy, I think also just sitting with it and not trying to fix it or change it, it is a form of dealing with it in a healthy way. I'm not going to, I'm not gonna let it take root, but I'm not gonna just push it aside either and try to get rid of it as soon as possible. We had to do that out of survival, but I've kind of realized that the more you bottle up your emotions, the more they'll concentrate. It's almost like, it's like our words and our emotions and what we express is our breath, it's our voice. And if you take that voice away and you don't express or work through or release those emotions, then that evaporates. And so then what you're left with is this concentrated goo of emotions that just festers inside of you because your voice evaporated, and then it just piles up and it becomes this poisonous gunk that'll eventually, I think, just become a sludge that, poisons you from the inside out. And I'm realizing that's why there's been such a fear of releasing emotions, is because I know it's going to be intense. I know it's going to be concentrated, you know. It's not just the first time I'm feeling it, but the first time I'm feeling it in like 20 to 30 years. So I don't recommend bottling up emotions. It will backfire. I will say, if you can release what's bottled up in a safe way, you should do that, because the more you bottle it up, the more concentrated it's going to be, the more intense it will feel coming out. And even if you feel like you're dying when it comes out, I don't believe you will. I've survived it a lot of times over the last several years. But yeah, it's just something I've been learning, and that's why I'm holding space for my emotions now and continuing to work through releasing them as they come up and expressing them. Maybe not getting rid of them, releasing them, but just not letting them get concentrated, I think, is very important. But a lot of people aren't given that safe space and that safe atmosphere or environment to be able to do that, so they do bottle things up. But so I get it. But if you have an opportunity to express yourself, please do. And try not to feel ashamed with where you're at. You know, that's a very common trait in trauma. It's a very common side effect in from being abused and scapegoated by your abusers. I can make another video on that one too. So just kind of learning to be neutral for where you're at emotionally without totally like numbing yourself, I think is really important. I'm learning how to do that now. And so, but I think that's gonna be it for tonight for a overview video. This isn't as short as I was hoping it would be, but considering it's not my entire story, it could be a lot longer. So I guess if you have any thoughts or questions, feel free to leave your comments below, and feel free to come back for more on my story, my life, our life, because there's 39 pieces of us and we're still not whole yet, but we are on the path to wholeness, and I look forward to being able to share that process more and more with all of you. So thanks for listening. Bye.